I'd like to welcome Srinivasan once again to Arahana to talk about today's topic of self-management and dealing with challenges. Welcome and good afternoon, Chino.
Thank you, Vidya. Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, NICE, and for the wonderful, wonderful, wonderful work that you are doing. Thank you for the opportunity. I thank every one of the participants here as well for giving me an opportunity to share of what I've been able to glean, put together. So the structure that I'm going to have is probably going to be about 10-15 minutes of me speaking with the help of some slides. First and foremost, I believe I've learned this from my guru, that there is no copyright, just copy it, right? So there is nothing that is mine in that sense. So anybody can use this in whatever form they want. Just that if you're copying, copy it right. That's all. That's the request that I have. So with that, let me just get into the presentation that I have. I was wondering when I first heard the word challenge, right? What actually does a challenge mean, and what does self-management mean? So I thought about it, and then put together what I have found to be useful for myself, and more importantly for the clients that I work with, especially during the pandemic, and something that we are all not prepared for. And now coming out of the pandemic, like Sanjay was just saying before our session started, we have to come to terms with a few things that are probably a little difficult. What do we have to learn? What do we have to relearn? And more importantly, what do we have to unlearn? I think we're going to be talking a little about that. I'd like to keep the presentation short and open it up for questions so that there can be an interactive session, so to say. And I find that mostly in these question and answer sessions, there is a lot more value than me speaking in a monologue or just talking from a text. So with that, is that it helps us to be focused. And this is something that this is a slide that I use with all my presentations, and that's the beginning. And I ask a question: which kind of a desk do you think will offer greater potential for focused, productive work? More often than not, the answer that I get is the desk on the right offers better productivity, better focus, better ability to get things done. More importantly, to find what it is that one wants to find, a place for everything and everything in its place kind of thing. So this brings me to one of the most important things in terms of self-management, which is how can I stay 100% in the moment? How can I stay focused on the task I have at hand? On a table like this on the left, one of the things that I can do to make it look like a table on the left is to just gather everything that is there on the table and put it into a sack or put it into a dustbin. But then unfortunately, that is also not very useful, because if it's on the table, it means that it is useful. So one of the things that I've realized that might be useful is to actually look at everything that is on the table and look at it and say, what is this? Okay, when do I need it? Do I need it right now? When is it likely that I need it? Where should it be kept? When shall I re-access it, so to say? And if I do that for every single item that is on the desk, chances are that I will be able to have a desk that is on the right. And yet I have not just disposed of everything mindlessly. So I call this the Silsta Method, and I will talk about it. I'll just say what it is. So anything, it can be done, it can be used for being in the moment 100%, being 100% present in whatever task that we are going to be present in. For example, for me to be 100% present in this presentation and be here for the benefit of all the people who have chosen to invest their time, give me the gift of their time, so that I can be 100% useful for them. So just like this table, there could be many things on my mind. There could be many things on your mind as well. So the first thing that I do is I scan my thoughts. I scan all of the thoughts that are there in my mind. For example, I could be looking at it and saying, right now, one of the things that is on my mind is, what if the power goes off? What if the internet acts up and all of that? So the thought itself isn't what causes the trouble, but it is identifying the thought, and more importantly, the emotions or the feelings that I have with regard to that thought. So for example, I can say that, I'm a little concerned that internet has been acting up for the last 2 or 3 days. I'm a little concerned that it might come in the way of me doing this presentation well, or be able to listen, or my answers being communicated appropriately. Most important thing that I need to do is to label the emotion. I'm afraid, I'm anxious, I'm worried, I'm concerned, or it could be something that has made me upset, irritated, angry. The greater granularity that I get in terms of what it is that I'm feeling is very useful. Then what I do, just like the item on the table, I set it aside for a certain duration. For example, I can scan my mind, I can scan my thoughts and find out what would come in the way of me being 100% present. And I do this in a cycle. Scan, identify, label, set aside, scan, identify, label, set aside. A little like, going back here, the table on the left, there are so many things. Scan each and every item, identify where it needs to be, put it in that place. That finally, when I come to a stage where I say that there's nothing else that could come in the way of me being 100% present, I then affirm that, I'm going to stay 100% focused, 100% on the task that I'm going to do. I found that this is one of the most important things that all of my clients have benefited from. Most people who are finding it difficult to focus on a task, when they do this, they find it very, very easy to focus on the task. It could also be that when you are in the middle of something and somebody comes and talks to you, you can just take about 15 seconds to say, what, I'm setting this aside for the moment so I can be 100% with the person who's going to be with me at that point in time. This might sound or seem very, very simple, but the benefits of being 100% present in the moment are enormous. So I would urge every one of you to practice this. I have written about this. I can share links to that as well, which is a greater detailed note in terms of how to practice this, what I call the Silsta, to stay 100% present, 100% in the activity that we are engaged in. So with that, what we're going to do is straight and simple. We get into the self-management bit in a little bit, but when I saw this word challenge, the question that keeps coming up in my mind is, can there ever be an opportunity without a challenge? Can there be ever a challenge without an opportunity being inside of it, right? So that got me thinking, and this is another thing. This is based primarily on the work of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the man who wrote about the concept of flow, right? And he delved deep into what makes people excel, what makes people get into the zone, as they call it, where hours seem like minutes and minutes seem like hours, where they are at their best, right? So one of the key constituents of being in the zone is that there needs to be a challenge. There needs to be an opportunity. So what Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi said was that on one axis, he plotted challenge. And he said challenge could be low, medium, or high on the y-axis. And on the x-axis, he called it skills or preparation. I have made a small change to that nomenclature and said, it's not just about skills. How much of skills do I have? And how much of the skills I have am I using? So if you look at it, when the skill is low and the challenge is low, it really doesn't matter one way or the other. The most common example that I use for those of us in Bangalore is driving or managing Bangalore traffic, right? The challenge, there's nothing that we can actually do about it. So best that we are not getting hassled about it. Or if you take a situation where whatever game that you're playing, let's say it's cricket or whatever game that you are good at, if you had to play with a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, chances are that your skills might not be very high, but the challenge also isn't very high. So it really doesn't matter to you one way or the other how it turns out. But then, if the challenge were of a medium intensity or a medium level and your skills are still low, chances are at that point in time, we start getting worried. We start getting worried because the challenge seems to be higher than our ability. And we are not in a place where we can say, I don't care. And then if the challenge was really, really high and our skill levels or the utilization of the skills that we have are not very high, chances are that we will be afraid, anxious, and all of that. So if we were to look at it a little differently, so when the skill level or the utilization is medium and the challenge is low, we are in a state of boredom. Strictly speaking, these 4 boxes, there are going to be 5 other boxes. These 4 boxes, if between 10 and 20% of our life is in one of these, is spread among these 4 boxes, then we have a good blend of what we must have in life. But then if you look at the next box, which is where the skill levels are extremely high, you can all relate to this, where the challenges are very high. It's something that you've done so many times before. You are in a state of relaxed state. You are in control of the situation. You know that you can handle it. Many a time in life, in business, when we are faced with things that we have not come across, or like it happened during the pandemic, we really don't know what's going to happen next. And we don't know. Fear of the unknown makes us very, very anxious. So if we look at it, I call this box right in the middle. Csikszentmihalyi Mihély's, he's got only 8 classifications in this. This box of choice is something that I've introduced in my version of what he has created. And I call it the domain of choice. It is also the domain of mediocrity, because everything is medium. Mediocrity is when nothing is either too good or too bad. It's just medium. But then the beauty is that if we do not skill ourselves, prepare ourselves for the future, when we are in this state of mediocrity in the medium, chances are that we might slip into worry, anxiety, or apathy, which is not very useful. So right in the middle, in somewhere in life, we have a choice. Are we going to upskill ourselves? Are we going to relearn? Are we going to unlearn things that are no longer useful? That's the question that each and every entrepreneur, each and every individual has to have. Why just entrepreneurs? Everybody is an entrepreneur. Everybody is selling. And they need to ask themselves this question: where do I need to become better? Then we look at the 3 other boxes. These are the 3 really interesting boxes, if you ask me, in this, where we are in a state of flow, we are in a state of arousal, we are in a state of control. So where the skill level is medium, but the challenge is high, this urges us, this spurs us on to acquire new skills. This is where the adrenaline starts pumping, where we are learning something new. We are doing something that we have not done before. And it's a little like we learned to cycle. The first time we learned to cycle, we didn't learn how to balance, and we were a little, concerned. But then once we got the hang of the balance, we were in a state of arousal where we were practicing. We were tasting a certain level of success. Research that says that the right way to learn is out of 100% of the practice, 85% of the time we should taste success, 15% of the time we should taste failure. So somewhere we have to learn how not to do things, and we also have to learn how to do things. So a ratio of roughly 6:1. Getting it right 6 times and making a mistake once in a while is very useful. So challenges are those areas where we are likely to make a mistake, and we learn from that mistake. I came across the statement by an supposedly enlightened person called Nisargadatta Maharaj. And he said, it's a mistake only if it is repeated. So if we don't repeat it, it's not a mistake, it's a learning opportunity. Many of my clients, I tell them, when they tell me that, I made a mistake, I say, please don't use the word mistake. Tell them that I had a learning opportunity and I learned from it. Because the word that we use to describe it for ourselves makes all the difference. So I'm aware that I'm speaking a lot, so I'll go through the presentation. So this box, if you look at it, where your skill levels are very high and the challenge is medium. It's not that the challenge is medium. We have become better at it. We have practiced, we've really become good at it. So we are in control. But then the domain of growth, the domain of possibility, the domain of all challenges and opportunities is in this box of flow, where the challenge is high and our skills or our ability to use our skills is also high. But that's when we are in the zone. So whenever you look at, whenever you feel overwhelmed, whenever you feel worried, whenever you feel bored, ask yourself, what is it that I'm experiencing? Is it a question of upskilling myself? Is it a question of increasing the challenge? How can I create a challenge so that I don't have to wait? I don't have to be forced to change, but I can choose to change and be proactive about it. So if you look at it, is it a challenge or is it opportunity? It is a question of how we look at things. So I'm going to move into the next section, which is self-management. I'm going to keep this talk very, very brief. We are already at 4:20, another 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. So if you look at this presentation, by the way, is going to be available for anybody who wants it. This encapsulates everything that I'm going to be talking about today. There are three portions in terms of self-management. One is the physical body. How do I take care of my physical body? Because the physical body and the mental and emotional sides are very, very, very interlinked. The physical body affects how I think and how I behave and what happens inside my mind and my brain and my emotions. And my emotions and my mental thought patterns in turn affect what happens in my physical body. So they're interlinked. It is one unit of a human being. There are multiple parts of it. And then we're going to talk about the environment and what we can do. So some of you might agree with what I'm going to say. Some of you might not. Perfectly all right. And that's the beauty of life, choice, and that everybody is welcome to their opinion. Their experiences of life define what it is that they will agree to and what they will not agree to. And in that also lies a lesson that we have to learn, that if I strongly feel about something, if I have a confirmation bias, I'm likely to have cognitive dissonance. What does that mean? If I feel very strongly about something, chances are that I will miss out data to the contrary. And that might not be very, very useful, especially for entrepreneurs, right? So the first thing is, it is about the physical body. This is what you see in this slide is probably the result of some 30 odd books that I've read and probably about 150 to 175 hours of research that I've done. From, when I say research, I'm standing on the shoulders of other people who have done exceptional research. I have taken inputs from what they have researched and found out and put it into this capsule. Right. The first and most important thing, if you want to be successful in life, if your physical body is not well, there is very, very little scope that you'll be able to do things well at work. For example, if you have an excruciating stomachache, chances are that, your ability to think clearly will not be there. If you have a pounding headache, chances are that you will not be able to think as clearly as you would if you did not have a headache. Similarly, if we can take care of this physical body, chances are that we will be able to think clearly, plan, act, and achieve. So, brief one line. Vidhyashankar saw me a while ago and he said, "It seems like you've lost a lot of weight." I said, "Yes." And I told him, I'm following a process of intermittent eating. I'm not following a process of intermittent fasting, but intermittent eating. So I eat one meal a day. And in 3.5 months, I have managed to move 21 kilos towards my ideal weight. I have another 10, 12 kilos to reach my ideal weight, but I've gone 21 kilos. So what did I focus on? I focused on what I was eating, and more importantly, when I was eating. So I reduced the amount of time that I kept my gut fed. I kept my body fed. And if you look at it evolutionarily, When we do not have, you can all relate to this. When you've had an exceptionally heavy meal, I'm sure all of us have said at some point of time, you know what, I've eaten so much, I just want to sit down or I want to just take a nap. I don't want to think. I don't want to do any hard thinking. So if you really want to be at your peak performance state, you should not be in an overfed state. So if you really want to do some, key thinking work, it helps to be in a fasted state. However, there is research also that proves that the brain requires a lot of sugar to work. Chances are that the brain requires sugar, which comes easily when you're in a fed state, but it's not about eating too much. So there is a lot of research today that says that what goes on in the gut affects what goes on in the brain and affects our wellness. So the one simple thing that I will leave you with is eat to live healthy, find out what it is that works for you, hydrate yourself. The body is between 55 and 75% water. So hydrate yourself periodically and ensure that you are in good physiological health. Because when you are in good physiological health, chances are that you will be in better emotional and mental health as well. The second part of the physical triangle, so to say, is exercise. One is they found out that getting 20 minutes of sunlight within 1 hour of waking up, just simple, 20 minutes of direct sunlight, or being in nature, out in natural light, not in sitting inside a balcony, not sitting inside a room, but actually out. 20 minutes makes a huge difference to the entire, every single cell in the body. Every single cell has a 24-hour clock. And the starting of that clock, the 24-hour cycle, begins with some cells in the eyes that are called the melanopsin ganglion cells. They are placed in the lower half of the retina. So they detect overhead light. The greater the amount of light, natural light that hits the eye, which happens when you're out in sunlight, the better you will feel. I have worked with quite a few people who've been treated for, again, disclaimer, this is not medical advice, so please be very careful with what I'm saying right now. But I've had people who have been treated for medical depression, and they have been able to come away from medicines by simply doing 3 things. 1, being in nature for 1 hour in the morning, getting between 20 and 30 minutes of sunlight, direct sunlight, or being in natural light, and doing some form of exercise in nature within 1 hour of waking up. So it makes a huge difference. It helps you. Check it out. The third pillar is resting. Sleep has a very bad name today. Those of you who are interested in knowing more, you can please access a wonderful book called Why We Sleep, written by Matthew Walker. He's given quite a few talks. If you've already come across this, great. Most important thing is getting between 7 and 9 hours of sleep, right? When people tell me, I've got so much to do, I don't have time to rest. I tell them that it's a little like somebody who's driving in a hurry to get to a destination and they're saying, I don't have time to fill up petrol or diesel. I don't have time to stop and fill up petrol or diesel. I know that I might run out of petrol or diesel, but I can't take the risk. I need to rush to that place. What if you run out of fuel? Then the entire journey comes to an end. Sleep and rest are like that. So be very, very careful. I can answer questions. I'm just going to rush to the next one. The most important thing is ensuring that you have between 7 and 9 hours of sleep. Preferably going to bed between 9 and 11 p.m. and waking up between 5 and 7 a.m. That's a window that has been found to be extremely useful. I know there'll be people who'll say that's nonsense, perfectly all right. There is research and data that backs this up. So the second part of it is the mental and emotional aspect, right? What actually comes in our way? For example, when we did the Silsta, the thoughts that we think, most of what we are looking at, how we are processing information right now, each and every one of you who's listening to me is listening to me with the filter of your past experiences through which you are listening to whatever I'm saying. Wherever you find that what I'm saying aligns with what you are thinking, it's easier for you to accept it. Why? Because a new thinking process requires energy. The brain it consumes roughly about 25% of all the energy that the body uses up. The brain is 2% of body weight, and it consumes roughly 25% of all energy that is consumed in the body. So the brain specializes in making everything a habit, making assumptions, presumptions, because if it were to process every single piece of information afresh, it'll require too much energy and people will become very tired. So the brain is extremely energy hungry and therefore energy efficient. So you need to be aware of what are the thoughts that I'm thinking. Are they serving me? Are they not serving me? What of my past experiences are still useful? How much of it is relevant? That brings us to the next one, which is perspective. Do we understand what is our actual perspective? Many a time we mindlessly respond, just like we've touched something very hot. When we touch something very hot, we don't process it consciously. We just take our hands away and then we say, oh, I placed my hand on a hot plate or whatever it is. So, especially with regard to your thoughts, whenever it is about your emotions, take time to process what it is that you are actually feeling. Understand yourself. Evaluate how much of it is fact, how much of it is an assumption. There is research that says that most people, they have about 10% data, 90% is filled in by their assumptions and presumptions, which leads to a lot of trouble, especially in relationships, especially when we are communicating with people, especially in teams, especially with our respective spouses. So it's very useful that if you stop, understand, evaluate what you're feeling, and reappraise. How else can I look at it? Is there another way of looking at this? Can I reprocess this? And then finally, if you look at it, ask yourself what truly matters. One of the questions that I ask people, and this is something that I borrowed from other people, 5 years from today, the thing that I'm really worried about, that I'm getting angry about, I'm afraid about, I'm getting really worked up about, 5 years from today, will it make a difference? What kind of a difference will it make? Ask that question and then actually focus on doing what you can rather than sitting and worrying about it. The larger picture, there is one sentence that I've used there, which is service and serve. Whenever there is a problem, if you can focus on making life of other people better, chances are that your life will also become better because we are all interconnected. It is a cycle. So if you have a doubt, ask yourself, how can I serve somebody else? How would I support somebody who has the same problem that I have? And you might be pleasantly surprised that you will find answers to your own situations, your own challenges, or in a certain way, by doing that process, you will create that challenge into an opportunity. The third thing is in terms of the environment, right? What is your mindset? What is your mindset? Is it something that you need to look at? What is it that I'm getting upset about? What is the environment? Acknowledge the fact that it is what it is. We cannot change the environment. We have to work within the confines of the environment. For example, if you're playing a game of cricket or a game of football or a game of tennis, the boundary lines that we have tell us where or within which frame we can work. So the environment in many ways is a little like that. So what you can do is, first and foremost, what is your mindset? Are we looking at it as a challenge or am I looking at it as an opportunity? Am I looking at it as a problem? Am I looking at myself as a victim? Or am I looking at myself as a person who has the power to change what it is that's happening in my life? So I'm going to keep it very simple. I'm going into the next slide. I'll come back to this if you want. The question, how much of the environment do I control? You'll find out that very little of the environment that you control, except the internal environment, which is my thoughts, which is my perspective, which is what my past experiences teach me. I do not control anything or anybody else. I can only at best influence them. And the chances are that there are so many things that I do not control at all. making peace with the fact that there are certain things that I cannot control will help me be proactive and prepare ahead of time. There are tools and techniques that I've shared in other forums where we can prepare for all the problems that we can think of, and we can look at how we can prevent them. So that brings us to the attitude. What kind of an attitude am I going to have? Am I going to look at it as, there is work that has been done by this wonderful person called Richard Davidson. There is a wonderful book called The Emotional Life of Your Brain. It's exceptional. Those of you who haven't read it, I strongly urge that you can read it. It says that by and large, our brains are plastic, but the younger we are, the easier it is to bring about changes. And conversely, the older we are, the circuits in our brain get a lot more hardwired, and it becomes difficult. It's not impossible, but difficult to change. So our attitude is defined predominantly by age 7, by and large. However, it is possible that you can change your attitude, you can change your approach. For example, for most of my life, working life, my family, everybody knew me as an angry person. I was called the angry person. And I got the best certificate of them all when my sister, she's 7 years my senior, she actually met me last week and she said, amazing that you no longer get angry at all. It's absolutely amazing. It wasn't easy, but it is possible with awareness. What I'm aware of, I can acknowledge, I can accept, and I can then find alternatives. So the environment, please acknowledge that, you cannot keep on cribbing, you can't complain. You have to act or accept, don't crib or complain. That's what I would say. This is one of my favorite quotes by Aristotle. Excellence is is a habit. People normally talk about it. We are what we repeatedly do. Just before the session, Vidya and I, we were talking, and I said, how we do one thing is how we do everything. Take a look at your own lives. You'll find one common thread in everything that you do. There'll be one quality that runs across everything that you do, right? So if you want to be excellent, start focusing on excellence in the smallest of things. It's in the dotting of the I's, the crossing of the T's, that excellence comes in. So I'm not going to take too much time on this, but then I'll leave this with you. This is self-explanatory, right? So you need to focus on having a right blend of being focused on results orientation and implementation and communication and relationships, because no man is an island, no woman is an island. We need to work with and, more importantly, for other people. So if you can be high in terms of being focused on results orientation, implementation, doing what needs to be done, chances are that you will be able to achieve a lot more. And finally, in terms of results orientation implementation, the first step is you need to be clear about where you want to go, right? If you want to buy a ticket, the first question that people are going to ask you is, where do you want to go? So as entrepreneurs, be very clear about where do you want to go. That is your goal. Make it as specific as possible, make it as measurable as possible, make it as time-bound as possible, and then make it a stretch goal. Once you have clarity about where you are going and why, then focus on how you're going. And finally, what you need to do at each step of the way. And finally, all of that is of no use if you don't do it at the time that you're supposed to do it. So with that, my presentation comes to an end. Hopefully, some of it might have been useful. If it is not, apologies. Any questions?
Thank you. Thanks so much for the wonderful presentation. We'll now open up the Q&A box for the attendees to post their question. You can start asking your questions in the box. Before that, I have a few questions of my own that I want to ask you, Chinu. Thanks once again for putting things in context and perspective, right from starting with Silsa, which is about how do you bring yourself to the present in the now and acting in the now. And then touching upon what gets you to the state of flow. So both are very, very interrelated in some ways, right? But we all agree that to reach the state of flow in a day of 8 hours of work or 10 hours of work is impossible, right? we go through those anxiety, arousal, and choice and other relaxation phases before we get there, right? So which also ties in with your last final point, talking about excellence itself, right? Because usually when you're in a state of flow, the work that you do, you achieve a state of excellence too. It's only natural. So this is at an individual level, but when it comes to team level, right? How do we ensure that sum of parts is greater than what an individual can do?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think lovely synopsis and lovely question, Vidya. I think I have a very simple but not easy to implement answer. This is something that is misattributed to Mohandas Gandhi. It is actually a lady called Lorraine Torrance who said it. And she said, be the change you want to see in the world. For a long time, I used to attribute it to Mohandas Gandhi, and because I heard it from somebody I trusted implicitly. And then on a lark, I went and started researching that. So the answer to your question, how do I bring this about in a team? See, if we look at it, we were talking about the environment. The team is part of the environment. How much of it do I control? How much of it do I influence? How much of it do I have no control over? So the phrase that I use is, the person I have some semblance of control over is myself. I'm not even saying that I have control over myself, because many a time we realize that we really don't have control over our thoughts or how we respond, how we react. Because that again ties in with the fact that the brain has a very simple role. It wants to keep you alive. It wants to keep you away from trouble and in a place where you are surviving and thriving. So evolutionarily, we are, for example, I'll just digress a little, come back to your question, Vidya.
Yep.
Sight, if we look at sight, there are three components of sight. One is movement, the second is color, and the third is shape. There are three different parts of the brain that are associated with processing inputs that come from the brain. And these three parts of the brain function at different speeds. So if you look at it evolutionarily, the part of the brain that works the fastest, and you will notice it, even if you put your hand here at the periphery of your vision and shake your finger, you'll notice the movement. So the part of the brain that works with vision, the fastest is that which detects motion. Why? Because it could be a potential threat.
Right.
The second is shape, because the shape, we have it imprinted in our memories. This kind of a shape is danger. This kind of a shape is not danger. And then the third thing, which is color, right? So if you look at it, we don't have control over ourselves. So if I want to bring about a change in my team, if I want to, the word that I will use is, if I have to inspire my team to adopt a different kind of approach, to be more focused on excellence, I need to be more focused on excellence right through and through. You also made a very, very interesting and very important observation. Difficult in 8 hours to be in the zone all the time. Impossible. I actually tell people, don't even attempt to be in the zone for more than 2 to 3 hours in a day. Because the brain, like willpower is like any other muscle.
So we're talking about not being in the zone only for 2 to 3 hours in a day.
Yeah, start with 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Can you identify a 30-minute block? And ask yourself this one question at the end of that day. And the question is very interesting and very important. Today, did I do my best to be in the zone for 30 minutes? Safeguard my 30-minute time zone, where I'm focused entirely on excellence. See, once we get used to it, then we can start slowly expanding. I'll take a personal example, Vidya. I started swimming. I restarted swimming in 2006. I'd been off swimming for 10 years and then I restarted. When I started, it was a 25-meter pool and I could barely do 3 lengths of the pool, 75 meters in 4 minutes. And I'd be like a beached whale, panting and puffing and all of that. And I'd be in the pool for an hour, but I'd swim for 15 to 20 minutes. Then I started doing something very interesting. I said 1 length, 2 lengths, 3 lengths, turn around and do 1 stroke and stop. I just did that every day. I started increasing 1 minute bit by minute bit. And in 4 months' time, I was able to swim nonstop for 100 lengths of the pool in 80 minutes.
Phenomenal, yeah.
So, and everything, I started cycling. I started, more on this. A lovely book has been written by James Clear called Atomic Habits.
Yes.
He speaks a lot about it, where it is about incremental improvement. 1.01 raised to the power of 365 becomes 37.8.
True.
So if I'm 1% more than I was yesterday,
yes,
at the end of 1 year, if I just do 1% more than the previous day, I would be 38 times better than when I started. So 8 hours impossible at the beginning.
Yes.
And if I can start with 30 minutes and then increase it by 1 minute a day. I'll give you one more example.
Yeah.
I have a client in Bombay, dollar billionaire. And the question that he was to ask himself every day was, today, did I do my best to exercise for 60 minutes? And every day he would call me in the morning and he would say, today, did I do my best to exercise for 60 minutes? He'd say 0, 0, 0. I kept quiet for 2 weeks. At the end of the 2 weeks, I asked him one question. I said, how can we change this question that it would be stupid for you to give yourself anything but 10? And we finally came down to this thing saying, today, did I do my best to exercise for 1 minute? He laughed at me and he said, you're making fun of me. I said, no, stick to it. So he said, what is this 1 minute exercise? I said, sit in your office, raise your hand, put it down. Raise your hand, put it down for 1 minute. We started that way. 2 months later, he was exercising for 75 minutes.
Brilliant.
Every day. So it is that incremental, minute increments that make all the difference. So a small other thing is that reduce all the obstacles that come in the way of you doing the task. One of the questions that I saw was procrastination.
Yes.
Simple. Procrastination simply means there is something about the task that I don't like. Find out what I don't like. Remove all the obstacles that come up as what I don't like about the task. For example, there is this wonderful book called What I Talk About When I Talk About Running by Haruki Murakami.
Yeah.
And he's a marathon runner. So he asked this Olympic marathon runner, he tells the marathon runner, there are days that I feel like I don't want to put on my shoes and run. Do you ever feel that way? And the Olympic champion looks at him as though this was the most stupid question that had never been asked. And he responds with, every single day.
Wow.
So it is not that, people who do things are not prone to procrastination. They just remove the obstacles that come in the way of them being able to procrastinate. So if I have to exercise, I keep everything ready for the next morning before I go to sleep. So I think start with small, taste success. The 85-15 that I mentioned in learning.
Yes.
Make sure that you set your environment up such that you are able to taste success 6 times out of 7.
Yeah, there's a wonderful point that, you talked about running. I read somewhere about, because we're all in working professionals, executives in offices. The common refrain is, oh my God, I have to do a lot of presentation, right? Or I have to do this. So tied over procrastination on the same topic, is it visualize the satisfaction, joy, the impact that you want to have after you've done the presentation, right? So in some ways, you bring the future forward in terms of thinking what that will be like, right? And then, use that as a motivation to go through the process of manifesting, right? And amongst many things, I think this I found to be very appealing, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Visualization, first a dream, then the plan, so to say.
Yes.
You'll relate to this, Vidya, because, we are both from Tamil Nadu, and Kannadasan said it beautifully.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know how to translate this, but then Paravai Parthan Vimanam Padaitan.
Yes.
Right?
Seeing
I see the bird, I create the airplane.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So visualizing is extremely important.
Yeah.
The where and the why. If you look at the clarity portion of what I shared last,
yeah.
Where do I want to go? And more importantly, why do I want to go there?
Yeah. Yeah.
What will I feel? What will people say about me? What will I think of myself? What will the future be like for me when I achieve this? Very powerful statement that you made, Vidya. Exceptional.
Thanks. So a couple of other questions I'd like to go through, Chino. Okay. So you addressed Kailash's question about procrastination. Namrata Sharma has posted a question saying, what to do and how to be positive when in spite of having time-bound plans due to COVID, nothing worked. As in, she's talking about some element of stress. How do you stay positive when things are not going according to your plans?
Absolutely.
I want to run through the questions, then I want you to answer all of them because they're interrelated.
Yeah.
There's one more question about perfection, right? So, this perfection is everything, and everything is slowing me down. How do I get over the habit? Is that true that success lies in shabbiness? How, right? And then there is a question by Sainath again. How do you overcome self-doubt, and how do you deal with consequences of the actions you take, right? Then in the Q&A box, the question about how do we stay motivated to get the desired thing that we want in our life. Right? So there's about perfection, self-doubt, and staying motivated. Over to you, Chino.
So I'll handle the one most common thing that everybody has, self-doubt.
Yeah.
It's a very useful thing, because when I used to tell people when I was 22, I didn't think I knew everything. I knew I knew everything. Right? And now I'm 56. I know that I know very little. So what has happened, because I knew that I knew everything, was I was arrogant. And it also is a reflection of how little I actually knew them. So self-doubt is extremely, extremely useful. Because I keep saying that, fear and anger aren't bad. They're very, very useful. In Bangalore, fear is very, very useful, which is why even when I cross a one-way street, I look both ways. Right? Because I'm not going to take saying, I can do anything. So self-doubt is extremely useful. It keeps us honest. Pushing the boundary, pushing the envelope, and making it more challenging for myself, which is also going back to that flow diagram, where I keep on increasing the challenge. Because if I'm in that relaxation, control and relaxation, if I don't handle it, chances are that I will go into boredom. And then I will slip into apathy. And then I'll find that I've been left behind. They say that the universe is constantly expanding, right? And anything that is stationary in an expanding universe is regressing. So self-doubt, and Intel, Andy Grove said it beautifully when he said only the paranoid survive. I don't want people to be paranoid, but I think a healthy level of doubt, worry, concern, anxiety, and thinking about all the things that can go wrong is very useful. In Bangalore, one of the most famous dishes is upma. But upma has to have a certain amount of uppu. But if it is only uppu, it becomes a problem. So similarly with self-doubt, with doubt, with fear, with anxiety, we need to have a certain amount of it for us to function properly. A battery holds charge primarily because there is a huge difference between the positive and the negative terminals. So we need to have that self-doubt. We need to have that, not in every area of our life, but in certain areas of our life, especially the ones that we are learning about. Useful to have some self-doubt. And also in areas where we think we know everything there is to know, useful to check whether we actually know it. So that's one thing that I will say. The second question was about perfection, right?
Yes.
Perfection is a mirage. Perfection is an illusion. Perfection is the enemy of good, right? When I aspire to be perfect, that will not remain perfect forever. Because when Ford Model T came out, it was the perfect automobile in that time, given the environment, the circumstances. But today, when we look at a Tesla, Ford Model T is far from being perfect. So this perfect is something that is a misnomer, right? I am a barista. And I learned something very interesting. There were 8 people who came home and I made 8 different coffees, completely different. There was not one single coffee that was the same as the other. And when I asked each and every person, how's the coffee? Standard answer, perfect. And that got me thinking that perfection in the coffee is not decided by the person who makes the coffee, but by the person who consumes the coffee. So it is not about being perfect. Am I doing what is expected of me? If I was a service provider, I should always look at delivering more than my client expects me to deliver. By no stretch of imagination will that be perfect, right? There's another book which I read, which is an exceptional book called The Art of Being Kind. In that, Stefan Einhorn is a Swedish doctor who wrote about this book. And he writes it very nicely. The day one thinks that they are their own ideal is the day they have to begin again from scratch. So when I think I'm perfect, I think I'm my own ideal. And that is the day I have to start again from scratch. So this perfection is an illusion. It will not remain perfect because it's like the fastest or the person who's done the most. It is there for a time. Even when I ask people who's the fastest human being, the answer that I get is Usain Bolt. And I actually say the true answer is we don't know. We don't know about that person who was chased by a lion and who ran faster than Usain Bolt to climb up the tree. We don't know.
We don't know. Yeah.
Right? So perfection is not something that is appropriate. What I need to ask myself, and this is the most powerful question I can ask myself, is today, given the circumstances and where I am, have I done my best? Emphasis on my best. My best today does not necessarily have to be my best tomorrow because the circumstances could have changed. So it is circumstantial, it is situational. Given the circumstances, have I done the best I can? Is what I would like people to think about. And that sort of answers that question, which, I've done everything that I can, but COVID came and, dealt us such a big punch that we don't know what hit us. It is what it is. It is what it is, right? One way of looking at it is, it is going to sound a little negative, the way I'm saying it. But can I compare myself to people who were hurt even more than I have been? People who have been less fortunate than I have been? Can I look at the silver lining in this cloud? It might seem like a defeatist approach, but it's about changing one's attitude. The chances are that, I was ready. It didn't happen. For example, right now the IPL is going on. One classic case of somebody who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time consistently is Dinesh Karthik. Exceptional cricketer. Just as he was there, he was number 2, he was ready, and then Dhoni came on the scene, and then he was relegated. But he constantly has reinvented himself. Never once taken whatever life threw at him, right? We can always find something or the other that is not right about the person, but we can choose to look at what it is that we can learn from them. So I would say that let's look at, okay, yeah, so this is it. None of us could have changed what COVID did. Can we now look at what we can learn from COVID and what can we do now? So I don't think anything else is possible, because that's all there is.
Yes. Thanks, Chinu. Thanks for highlighting on dealing with perfection and self-doubt. I think we almost time, and we have a few more minutes before I want to wrap up the session. One question, I mean, any session on self-management, we can't complete without talking about stress. I know it's a very long topic and we can talk forever, but stress is something that is experienced by all of us more than ever. Some people say, in a lot of cases, it can turn out to be very fatal as well, right? So I want you to summarize the session and then talk about dealing with stress before we complete the session.
So when people talk about stress, they're actually talking about distress.
True. Not eustress, but distress.
They're not talking about eustress, they're talking about distress.
Yeah.
Right? Because a certain amount of stress is what makes the heart pump, which keeps us alive. Without stress, the heart wouldn't beat. So I'll actually give you one small technique, very simple technique that can help people bring down the stress like that. If you can see my eyes, I'm holding out my two fingers here, just as a pointer. I don't need to hold it up. But if you look at it, I'm holding up my two fingers in front of me. So the angle, if you look at the angle between my two fingers, it will be probably 110 degrees. Little more than 90, not 180. I'm not holding it here at 180. I'm holding it at about 120. Okay. So you can try this out right now. Whenever there is something that causes you to be distressed, use the technique to find out what it is that you're upset about, what it is that you're irritated about, what it is that you're afraid about, what it is that you feel resentful of, what is it that you feel let down, betrayed, whatever it is, or worried about. Keep that feeling there and simply do one thing. Just watch my eyes. I'm moving my eyes between the two fingers. I'm just watching. I'm moving my eyes in a straight line this way. 120 degrees, I'm moving this. And I'm holding in my mind the thought that distresses me, or the thought that causes me to be upset. All I need to do is to do it for 10 seconds. Check it out for yourself. I've noticed that when I ask them on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being I'm petrified, I'm frozen. From 10, in 3 cycles, people come down to 1 or 0.
Phenomenal.
Right? And all it takes is 30 seconds. And it is scientifically proven, because the eyes, they are not just a sensory organ. They are part of the central nervous system, and they are the one part of the central nervous system that is directly connected to the brain. If you want more on this, there is this wonderful podcast by Andrew Huberman. He is a professor of ophthalmology and neurobiology at Stanford University, right? And his podcast is exceptional. They're all 2.5 hours, 3 hour long podcasts, but there is so much of information condensed in those 2.5 hours that he probably condenses 20 books in that 2.5 hours, right? So this is something that is proven. There is a technology called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reappraisal. This is used for treating people who have been in war zones and they are in post-traumatic stress disorder, that the smallest sound makes them go berserk and all of that. They've been asked to move their eyes like this for 30 seconds at a time, 15 seconds at a time, and their stress levels come down. The second thing I will leave you with, which is a very, very simple technique that you can do, is breathe what is called box breathing. So 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004. This is a 4-second cycle. So box breathing entails 4 steps. 4 seconds of inhalation, 4 seconds of holding, 4 seconds of exhalation, 4 seconds of holding.
Right.
So you are breathing, one breathing cycle is 16 seconds. In a minute, you will do about 3.75 breathing cycles. This will bring down your heart rate and your stress levels, distress levels greatly in just one moment.
Phenomenal.
There's a book written by Amishi Jha. It's called Peak Mind, where they did research. And they found out that if you do this 1 minute of breathing, 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds exhale, 4 seconds hold. If you do that once 1 minute cycle for 12 times in a day, it greatly helps you be in the moment, handle your stress. So the other thing that you can do, and this is something that I share with all my clients, every hour, step outside, if nothing else, onto the balcony, look at the horizon, get some natural light on your body. Right. Look at the horizon, look at something close by. Look at the horizon, look at something close by. This will bring down your stress levels as well. So I hope that's useful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chinu. Thank you so much to all our attendees to pose all questions. I think we all agree that we need to do one more session to delve deeper, be it on stress management, be it on shifting our modes and mindsets, right? Bringing about long-term changes in our behavior, rewiring ourselves, whatever the topic are in terms of performance, peak mind, all of that. And hope to have the session soon with you. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for everybody's time. Bye for now. Namaste.
Thank you very much. Namaste.